They called him family. He called them home. For years, they shared meals, holidays, and quiet moments, moments they thought were safe. But trust, as they would soon learn, is fragile. Behind the warm smiles and familiar embraces, a darkness grew unnoticed. Two women, his stepmother and his grandmother, never imagined that their greatest danger wasn't from the outside world, but from the man they had welcomed into their lives. He didn't just hurt them with his hands. He shattered them with something they couldn't see, something they didn't even know was there. It wasn't just an assault on their bodies. It was a silent, invisible destruction that would change their lives forever. And yet, what's most haunting is not what he did, but how they responded. When faced with the kind of betrayal that would break most, their reaction was anything but ordinary. This is not just a story of violence. It's a story of trust betrayed, of innocence stolen, and of a family bound by secrets they never chose to keep. What happened in that home will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and justice. Welcome to True Crime Unseen, where we hunt through into the darkest corners of human nature and uncover the most chilling true crime stories. Thank you, my viewer, and most especially my subscribers, for your support. Your encouragement helps us share true crime stories. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Today we bring you a story that is not just about violence. It's about betrayal, trust, and the haunting aftermath of a secret no one could have imagined. Two women. One, a kind-hearted stepmother, eager to build a bond with the stepson she had welcomed into her life. The other, a gentle grandmother who had spent her years nurturing and protecting the very family that would soon face unimaginable horror. They gave him love, patience, and forgiveness, believing they could help him, believing they knew him. But they were wrong. This isn't just a story of physical harm. It's a story of devastation hidden beneath the surface. A betrayal so insidious it left wounds that could never fully heal. He didn't just assault them. He left them with something far worse. And as the truth slowly unraveled, it wasn't the violence alone that shocked those around them. It was the horrifying revelation that he had infected both women with HIV. The betrayal was only the beginning. When the police were called, no one could have imagined how deep the deception ran. What started as a domestic violence investigation quickly spiraled into something far more sinister. Questions emerged. How had this happened? How had a man they trusted turned into a monster? And how did he carry a secret so deadly without anyone noticing? This isn't just a story about violence. It's a story about the fragility of trust, the horror of deception, and a reaction so unexpected that it's still talked about today. Because when the truth came to light, when the full extent of the horror was revealed, the family's response was unlike anything anyone had anticipated. DNA tests confirmed the unthinkable. The officers handling the case had seen many crimes, but none quite like this. What they uncovered would change the lives of everyone involved forever. Who was he? A troubled youth trapped by circumstance, or a calculated predator hiding behind the guise of family? To understand what led to this horrific crime, we must first uncover his past, one riddled with warning signs that no one saw, or perhaps no one wanted to see. Born into a fractured home, he struggled to find his place in a world that seemed indifferent to his pain. His early years were marked by instability, parents who fought more than they loved, a revolving door of foster homes, and a community that offered little support. Yet, despite these struggles, those around him believed he had potential. But beneath the surface, there were cracks, small, barely noticeable to those who weren't looking closely. A series of petty crimes in his teens, shoplifting, vandalism, brushed off as the antics of a restless youth. Yet there were whispers of something more troubling. Teachers reported bursts of rage, Friends noticed a fascination with control and manipulation. And then there was the time he nearly killed a neighbor's pet, claiming it was just an accident. But these weren't just the missteps of a troubled child. They were warnings. Warnings that went unanswered. Interviews from experts. Psychologists said, what we see in many of these cases is a pattern of escalating behavior. It often begins with minor offenses, testing boundaries, and, over time, that boundary testing becomes more dangerous. For this individual, it wasn't about acting out for attention. It was about control, power, and, ultimately, inflicting pain. Former friends also said, he had this way of making you feel uneasy, like he was always watching, calculating. I remember once he told me, one day I'll show everyone what I'm capable of. I thought it was just talk. I was wrong. As he grew older, the crimes became bolder. Breaking and entering, physical altercations, each incident more violent than the last. Police were called multiple times, but he always seemed to slip through the cracks. Authorities saw a troubled kid. They didn't see the predator he was becoming. By the time he entered his stepmother's home, the mask of the troubled youth had hardened into something far more dangerous. But no one, not the grandmother who adored him, nor the stepmother who tried to save him, realized they were living with someone who had already crossed the line. He wasn't just troubled, he was something far worse. And then came the DNA test, the moment the truth began to unravel, exposing a secret that would forever change their lives. Two women, loving, nurturing, and devoted. They thought they were safe in their own home, protected by the bonds of family. But those bonds would be the very thing that tore their lives apart. They welcomed him, cared for him, and trusted him, never knowing the darkness that would soon consume their world. She was more than just a stepmother. She was a woman who believed in second chances. Married into the family, she tried to bridge the gap between herself and the young man who, despite his troubled past, she believed deserved love and stability. She never hesitated to extend a helping hand, offering guidance, patience, and a place to call home. But what she gave in kindness, he would repay in cruelty. If the stepmother's love was nurturing, the grandmother's was unconditional. She had seen him grow from a boy into a man, never imagining that this same boy would one day become the architect of her suffering. She doted on him, believed in him, and prayed for him, even when others had given up. To her, he was still the grandson she believed she could save. For years, they lived under the same roof, sharing meals, laughter, and the occasional argument, like any family. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. There were moments of concern, minor outbursts, unsettling silences, strange disappearances, but never did they suspect the extent of his deception. They were his lifeline, and he was their undoing. As the years passed, cracks began to show. But it wasn't until a routine doctor's visit that the first true sign of danger emerged. A test result that would send shockwaves through the family, leading to a chain of events that no one could stop. The truth was coming, and it would tear everything apart. They thought they knew him. They thought they were safe, but in their kindness, they overlooked the monster within, and soon their world would come crashing down. What drove him to commit such a heinous act? Was it rage, desperation, or something far more sinister? And how did it all begin? The truth would reveal a web of manipulation, violence, and a secret so devastating that it shattered everything they thought they knew. The events began innocently enough, or so it seemed. He arrived at the house that night like any other, his demeanor calm, even affectionate. The stepmother and grandmother, unaware of the horror awaiting them, welcomed him in. But something was different. tension lingered in the air, unspoken yet felt. Then, the unprovoked violence began. He turned on them, the brutality swift and unrelenting. No warning, no reason. He struck his stepmother first, the shock in her eyes quickly replaced by fear. The grandmother tried to intervene, her pleas falling on deaf ears. She, too, became a victim of his rage. But the violence was only the beginning. The wounds were not just physical. They were about to discover a betrayal far worse than the violence itself. In the days following the attack, the stepmother and grandmother sought medical attention for their injuries. Routine tests were performed, blood was drawn, and soon the unthinkable truth emerged. They both tested positive for HIV. The doctors were perplexed until one question, simple yet devastating, was asked: is there anyone who could have done this deliberately? The pieces fell into place, each more horrifying than the last. He knew. He knew he was carrying the virus, and he chose to infect them. This wasn't just an assault. It was a calculated, deliberate act of biological violence. Two women, already reeling from the physical attack, now faced a death sentence they never deserved. But why? What could drive someone to such cruelty? And would the justice system ever be able to comprehend the depth of his betrayal? The police were called, and an investigation began. But the true turning point came when law enforcement made a startling discovery: a DNA test that would reveal something even more shocking than the crime itself. What the police found would change the course of the investigation, and the family checked forever. Most would expect anger, rage even. After all, how could anyone forgive such an unspeakable act? He had taken everything from them: their sense of safety, their health, their trust. But what these two women did in the wake of the crime was something no one could have predicted. As the trial began, the world waited for an eruption of fury from the two women whose lives had been irreversibly altered. The stepmother and grandmother sat quietly, listening as the horrific details of the crime were recounted. He hadn't just assaulted them. He had knowingly infected them with a life-altering disease. Yet, when the time came for them to speak, their words stunned everyone. "We don't hate him," the grandmother said, her voice steady. "We pray for him." Their words echoed through the courtroom, leaving onlookers and reporters stunned. In a case that begged for vengeance, they chose a path few could imagine: forgiveness. They asked the judge not for the maximum sentence, but for leniency. An act that baffled the prosecution, the public, and even the defense. Experts were divided. Psychologists called it a rare response to extreme trauma, one rooted in profound empathy. Criminologists suggested it was a coping mechanism, a way to regain control in an uncontrollable situation. Others believed it was an act of defiance, a refusal to be defined by the crime or by the hatred it could have cultivated. But was forgiveness enough? The DNA evidence had already revealed the shocking truth. The crime was undeniable. Yet even as they extended compassion, questions lingered. What truly drove this young man to such a monstrous act? And could the law deliver justice when the victims themselves pleaded for mercy? Justice had to be served. The crimes were brutal, the evidence undeniable, and the lives of two women forever changed. But the courtroom isn't just a place for justice, it's a place where emotions collide with the law. Would the system deliver the justice these women deserved, or would the outcome leave more questions than answers? The prosecution laid out a harrowing case. They detailed how the perpetrator had gained the trust of his stepmother and grandmother, then assaulted them both, knowing he carried a deadly virus. They presented medical records and DNA evidence confirming he knowingly infected them with HIV, a chilling revelation made possible by a routine DNA test ordered by detectives early in the investigation. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom was gripped with tension. The prosecutor described his actions as calculated and cruel, demanding the harshest sentence possible. "This was not an act of rage," the prosecutor declared, "but an act of pure, deliberate malice." The defense, however, painted a different picture. They argued that the perpetrator was a troubled young man, shaped by a difficult upbringing. They emphasized his troubled past, claiming he acted out of confusion and desperation rather than intent to cause harm. "He didn't mean to ruin lives," the defense attorney said. "He was lost, broken, and in need of help." The most gut-wrenching moment came when the victims took the stand. With tears in their eyes, they told the court of the pain they endured, not just from the physical assault, but from the betrayal. Yet even in their agony, they shocked everyone with their plea for mercy. "We don't want him to rot in a cell," the grandmother said softly. "We want him to find redemption." After days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. The judge, somber yet firm, handed down the sentence: decades in prison. But even as the sentence was read, the stepmother and grandmother held hands, not in triumph, but in solemn acceptance. "Justice has been served," the judge stated, "but the scars left behind may never heal." Yet the story didn't end there. A single question still lingered. Could forgiveness truly heal the wounds that justice could not? Or would the past forever haunt them all? The case quickly made headlines across the nation, dominating front pages and news cycles. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime that captivated the public, it was the victim's unthinkable response. While many expected outrage and demands for the harshest punishment, what they heard instead sent shockwaves through communities everywhere. As the verdict was announced, the media frenzy intensified. News outlets dissected every moment of the trial, from the grim details of the assault to the shocking revelation of HIV transmission. But what truly captured the public's attention was the victim's decision to forgive. "How could they?" asked one viral social media post, garnering thousands of comments. Some called their forgiveness a testament to unimaginable strength, while others expressed disbelief, labeling it naive or foolish. Major networks aired debates between legal experts, psychologists, and ethicists. One news anchor remarked, "It's rare to see such grace in the face of such horror. But does grace equal justice?" A popular legal analyst responded, "Forgiveness does not absolve crime, but it does redefine how we perceive vengeance." Many praised the women's ability to find peace amid devastation. One viral interview featured a survivor of a similar crime who tearfully said, "I never thought forgiveness was possible, but now I see it as strength." Others, however, were outraged, demanding harsher punishment for the perpetrator and criticizing the court's handling of the case. Social media platforms lit up with hashtags "Forgive or Punish," "Justice for the Women," and "Forgiveness Debate," sparking intense discussions. Some rallied in support of the victims, holding vigils and candlelight marches, while others organized protests, demanding tougher sentences for crimes involving intentional HIV transmission. The media's portrayal of the case walked a fine line between admiration and critique. In exclusive interviews, the stepmother and grandmother explained their decision to forgive. "We didn't want to live with hate. We wanted to take back our lives." These words became headlines, but also a lightning rod for public opinion. Even years later, documentaries and news specials revisited the case, dissecting how the justice system, media, and society reacted to an act of forgiveness so profound that it still left the nation divided. In the court of public opinion, the case became more than a crime. It became a reflection of how we grapple with justice, mercy, and the true meaning of forgiveness. For the victims, life would never be the same. The courtroom may have delivered its verdict, but healing from a crime this devastating is a lifelong process. They carried with them not only the trauma of the assaults, but also the permanent shadow of a deadly disease. And yet, in the aftermath of such horror, they made a choice, one that shocked the world. They chose forgiveness, but not the kind born of weakness. It was a forgiveness born of pain, resilience, and an understanding that holding on to hatred would destroy them more than the crime ever could. The stepmother and grandmother, though bound by the same tragedy, took different paths in their recovery. One sought solace in her faith, becoming an advocate for victims of abuse and spreading awareness about HIV. She spoke publicly about her journey, emphasizing that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. "I'll never forget what he did," she once said in an interview, her voice trembling, "but I refuse to let it control me." The grandmother, more reserved, withdrew from the public eye, choosing a quieter path of reflection. Friends described her as a woman of incredible strength, who found peace not in forgiving the man, but in forgiving herself for what she called her blind trust. "I trusted him like a grandson," she told a confidant, "and I paid the price, but I won't let regret define me." Meanwhile, the man who shattered their lives sat behind bars, sentenced to decades in prison. Reports suggest he remains unrepentant, his actions viewed by many as cold and calculated. Psychological evaluations during the trial painted a disturbing picture, a man who seemed devoid of empathy, his motivations rooted in a need for control rather than impulsive rage. Yet, the victims never sought revenge. They requested that he receive the necessary medical care, a decision that baffled the public but remained consistent with their desire to rise above the cruelty inflicted upon them. "We didn't want him to die," the stepmother explained. "We wanted him to understand the life sentence he gave us." This case forced the public to confront difficult questions. What does justice look like in the face of such cruelty? Is forgiveness a form of strength or surrender? For some, the victim's actions were a powerful reminder of the human capacity for grace. For others, it sparked outrage, a belief that justice was not served unless vengeance was sought. Legal scholars debated the implications of the case for months. Was the sentence too lenient? Should the transmission of a deadly disease have led to a harsher penalty? And what does it say about the system when the victims themselves show more compassion than the perpetrator? In the end, the story isn't just about the crime. It's about resilience in the face of unimaginable pain, the strength to forgive without forgetting, and the lessons we can learn from those who chose to rise above their suffering. For these two women, life didn't end with the crime. It changed, yes, but it continued. And through their story, perhaps we too can find meaning in the darkest moments and learn what it truly means to let go without losing ourselves. Forgiveness is a powerful word, easier said than done, and in this case, almost incomprehensible. Two women, forever changed by someone they loved, chose mercy over vengeance, grace over rage. Could you? Could you forgive someone who shattered your life so completely, who knowingly left you with a life-altering illness? Or would justice demand something more? Their choice leaves us with a haunting question. Is forgiveness the ultimate strength or an unfathomable weakness? If this story moved you, challenged you, or left you thinking, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Could you forgive such a betrayal? If you found this story compelling, please like the video, subscribe to True Crime Unseen, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another chilling true crime story. Thank you for watching.